Hey everyone. So I'm here to tell you that I'm starting a new series on my channel where I'm going to be talking in the next coming weeks with fellow guitarists and musicians, and we're just going to be talking about general things that maybe you guys want to hear. So first up we have David Beebee, who's a brilliant guitarist from England, and in this episode, which is an hour and 45 minutes long, I thought about splitting it up into two parts, but the conversation flowed really nicely, and David was kind enough to, give us an insight of how he sees the fretboard, his fretboard visualization, his legato, his just the playing in general, and also we hear from him about his struggles within the music industry and how learning was not always easy. So I think it's going to be really beneficial for you guys. Please go and check out David's stuff, which I will post all in the comments below. But yeah, enjoy the episode and let me know what you think. Hi guys, I hope you're all doing well out there. So today I am chatting with Mr. David Beebee. David is a fantastic guitarist hailing from the UK and who is well known within the guitar community. He's 1/4 of the Guitar Hour podcast and co-creator of the fantastic fretboard visualization app called Solo. Today we're just going to be chit-chatting a number of topics and asking David what he thinks of some things, all being guitar related, and in his life and music. So, hello David.
Hi, mate. How's it going?
Yes, all good, thank you.
To your views of the channel.
Yeah, yeah. Hope to build it up. But
I am a viewer myself, actually. I watch your channel and enjoy playing a great deal, mate. So you're also likewise a fantastic player. So enjoy your content. Say that too.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to get feedback sometimes from fellow musicians, and not just read comments in a YouTube comments. It's nice to actually speak to another guitarist because we're just always isolated in our four walls, aren't we? Seems where most of our life is.
Can be that way, yeah.
But yeah, it's actually the first
thanks
time
for inviting me on. Yeah. Is it the first time we've spoken? Actually, have we not?
I don't know.
This is so weird with online communication and online friendships because you can sort of you can forget that you haven't met someone in real life if you've spoken to them a lot via text, chatting. And then, like, I don't know, perhaps we haven't even done a Zoom call before, but it feels like we have. But we probably haven't. It's weird. These online relationships can be so kind of weird.
I know. Yeah. I think we maybe have, but I can't remember. Nothing like this anyway. So no, I really appreciate for you just coming on, and maybe for the listeners who don't, well, they probably will know you, but I mean, it's good for them to know maybe a bit of a background about your, your career and your life as a musician and a guitarist. So I know I summed up a bit at the start there, but do you just want to give like a few words of kind of thing what you do and how you maybe started out playing and so on and so forth?
I don't want to sort of be too main character syndrome here, but I guess it's somewhat a little interesting in that I've got two kind of halves or two arcs to my guitar life or career. I started off as many people do. I was 8, 9 years old, fell in love very early on with it. I realized it was what I wanted to do, and it just consumed me, practicing, the 7, 8 hour days through my teens and stuff. Decided to go to music college. I went to do a jazz degree at Leeds College of Music, and that's where then things kind of fell off the rails for me. I kind of scraped my way through music college, but it really wasn't the ideal route for me. I shouldn't have taken that path in terms of doing jazz. Didn't really like it at the time, couldn't do it, still couldn't do it even when I graduated. And really because of that, fell out of love with the guitar, fell out of love with music. All through my 20s, I was teaching guitar, doing function gigs and things, but really not invested as a player, not, really interested or in love with the instrument in any way. And that caused, I guess you'd say, quite a lot of unhappiness in general. And then when I hit 30, so this is now getting on sort of 10
Don't
years
give
ago.
It away. So don't give it away.
11. Yeah. So when in my early 30s, anyway, so I was 31, 32, I had this kind of like, I guess it's a bit of an early midlife crisis, and this existential dawning on me that like, oh, what have I done with my 20s? I was this period where I'd like, holy crap, like I went to music college, I screwed it up, I couldn't do this thing, I had all this kind of regret, this kind of almost shame, if you like, of not learning to play changes, not learning to be able to play jazz and stuff. And I looked in the mirror and said, like, okay, you're not old, you're 31, whatever it was, you've got time, you know, you can turn it around and learn to do this thing. And that was ultimately what I set off on the path of doing in my early 30s, was to almost just restart the guitar. Like look at it as, if I could start again from scratch, how would I do this? Knowing what I know and how to correct the issues that I had musically and as a player and as a musician, and resolve that and try to make those changes. I guess that's a bit pun intended.
No pun intended. Yeah.
So that I could, sort of like tackle that challenge again that I didn't do the first time around. And in doing so, what happened was I started to apply myself in secret, because I was kind of hiding a lot of this away from sort of friends and peers and colleagues and things, because I was, for all my 20s, I was trying to hide the fact that I couldn't really do this thing, play changes, play jazz and that kind of style of music. And so I was kind of beavering away in secret, working incredibly hard, and started making little bits of progress. And that's, I guess, in the process of doing that, has started to small changes turn to big changes. And then I fell in love with it. It opened up this world to me again. And as I realized that I could do this a little bit, and then I could do a little bit more, I then sort of found myself falling in love with the genre in terms of jazz and fusion and R&B and funk and soul and stuff, in a way that I'd really struggled with when I was a rock shredder at jazz college. The first time. I know
what you mean. I come from
but I then massively fell super head over heels with jazz and improvised music and harmony, and got deeply into it in a way that I never ever would have dreamt of the first time around. One thing, I guess, kind of led to another in terms of the consuming the online guitar world in the sort of 2000 teens, if you like. I ended up working on the Guitar Hour stream with Tom Quayle, Dan Smith, so relatively local to me.
Yes.
That kind of kickstarted me doing things online, and then again, one thing leading to another, and then
it's kind of
here I am now, I guess. And it's never it was never sort of an intentional plan to sort of have any kind of career of, by the time I was in my early 30s, I'd long thought any kind of guitarist-based career was beyond what I was doing was possible. So this was never to do any of the things I have been doing recently, was never in any kind of plan. It just happened accidentally through falling in love with the thing, being able to learn to do the thing, and then just finding opportunities to play with people was super important, which I'd hidden away from and shied away from all that earlier time. And then obviously playing and jamming with Dan and Tom and Jake and all these anyone that I could sort of get my metaphorical hands on.
You wanted to surround yourself
playing
with
people, guitar players.
Absolutely.
Playing with people way better than me that would drag me up. And that was a phenomenal experience in the sort of 2016-17 period, where I was jamming with people regularly, and different people regularly and something frequently when I'd see them, and as many guitar players that I could play with as possible in duo settings. I found that, I still do, I find that such an incredibly rewarding musical experience. It's really, really cool thing to do, and I'm kicking myself out I never did it all those years ago, because it's musically rewarding and interesting. And it also, as I say, if you've never done that as a guitarist, very often guitar players don't do this. It's not in an improvised setting. You might get two guitarists in a rock band, but usually in an improvised setting, you've got a guitarist in a group, quartet, quintet, whatever, on their own. But I think two guitarists sitting down and working on the things that are challenging together, you get it. You can help one another, you can grow and sort of push one another, and
especially that up close and personal as well, right? When you're sitting that far away, you can see someone, you can hear someone's tone, and visually see what they're doing. You pick up little
Yeah,
nuances along the way, which is,
yeah.
priceless, really. So going back to your, you've come out of college and you've kind of burnt it all to the ground, should we say? So you're kind of starting again,
Yeah. That's it.
and it's hard to let that kind of, you've built up to, I imagine, to a good level, as it were, playing the rock stuff and the 3 note per string kind of thing. But almost letting your ego go to think, right, I'm going to start again, takes some quite big, like, steps. So was there ever a moment when you thought, forget this, I'm just going to quit? I may want to be able to do the changes thing in jazz, but maybe I'm just going to do something else. It's so kind of sucking, you know, swallowing your ego,
It's a good
as
question.
it were. Yeah. How did
No,
you
it's a
find
really
it?
good question. um, I'll just for the real nitty gritty detail of this. We did a podcast. Dan Smith and I did a podcast episode where I go through the whole kind of story in detail. Um, maybe you can link to that in the
I
description if
will. I
anyone's
will. I will. Yeah.
interested. I don't know. But I mean, it does. The point I was at was I've always been quite realistic and tried to be as honest with myself as possible and um, pragmatic to some extent, even if it's painful. And I think that I distracted myself through my 20s with other like pursuits. I, you can't tell now, but I was very in shape. And I went to the gym a lot. I got obsessed with that. I was studying like I studied Arabic, comparative religion, philosophy. I
Wow.
sort of like I kind of threw myself into all these kind of other
Yeah.
intellectual pursuits as distractions from the thing which I'd failed at through music college, and so, but when that kind of all burnt out in my early 30s, and you hit that number,
Mm.
that 3 AO, and then think things aren't where I never thought, okay, I'm going to be a guitar star or whatever, or a musician, famous musician, but it was really like, okay, not just the lack of success or career, but also the lack of self worth and fulfillment of like when I looked in the mirror,
Yes.
I knew like you've let yourself
I
down.
feel
Like,
you. I feel you.
maybe,
Yeah.
maybe the world, externalities have also of course, played a role in that in terms of, support, education, like all of these other things. But also, like, you still can't shake the feeling of having let yourself down. And so it was like it was trying to like untangle the real flaws from the perceived and imagined flaws as well, because we're also our own worst critics. We're our own worst, we also, get the imposter syndrome, and we get all of these feelings of feeling like, I'm crap, whatever, making mistakes. And so it's untangling that sort of false ego narrative of like, I'm the worst player in the world,
Mm.
and also the genuine real flaws that were in my playing. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes untangling that is a really difficult job. And I think I was surrounded by in those those mid 2000 sort of tens and teens with really kind, helpful people and
Mm.
friends who were able to understand that. And because they were guitar players, also be able to honestly reflect to me like um, where I could improve, and where I was just lying to myself and tricking myself with too negative
Yeah.
thoughts. So I think that can be a really, yeah,
That's a good,
um,
really good point there.
really, yeah. You can have like these false kind of negative, overly critical things, and then but then you can also have actual flaws and faults as well. And trying to pass those two things out is not necessarily easy to do. But I mean, so just I guess I'll answer the question about did I ever think about quitting. Like I'd kind of already set myself up in a position where I couldn't really do that. I was untrained in anything else. I was like, so I guess you could say like, I was teaching professionally and trained in other things. Of course, I had these other sort of hobbies that I took seriously, but um, I the way I looked at it was that if I have to be doing this, I have to be either teaching guitar or doing like gigs and things.
Mm.
So if I have to be doing that, then I might as well try to get good at it and
Sure.
and try to maybe even have a happy accident to naturally fall in love with it again. And thankfully that kind of did that happened. Um, and I I kind of set myself up with two kind of guiding like stars, if you like, in terms of what to follow. Because burning it to the ground, starting it again, so to speak, could be an completely open-ended endeavor that you end up with options paralysis of like, okay, how is this going to happen at 31? This is not realistic. And as you alluded to, like I still had, through my teens, I developed a high level of shred technique. I could read music. I understood music theory pretty well.
Yeah.
So it was a case of, well, how do I marshal this into something that is actionable? So I took the two sort of primary goals of wanting to be able to play through changes at sight, so to be able to see a set of random chord changes or whatever standard or song it might be, and be able to play through it first time. And the goal being, it didn't have to be a great creative musical statement. It just had to be okay and get by. Because one of the absolute fears I had at music college was when you're in ensemble class and then that someone's teachers picked a song, a standard, whatever, out the real book, and then everyone you're playing through, and then they go around the room and everyone has to take a solo. And I hated that feeling of just getting to me and just not knowing what to do. Feeling just like I wanting the earth to open up and swallow me whole because I can't.
You're thinking about running out the door before what you're going to play over the next chord. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And so for me, that the goal, the biggest goal was to never ever have that feeling ever again. So I wanted to be able to, no matter what chord sequence appeared in front of me, I wanted to be confident that I could have a go at it and it wouldn't be terrible. That was my top priority.
Yeah.
To conquer that mountain.
So it's that classic case of
the other was to have
getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? You were really putting yourself in the deep end there because you were like, I really want to do this. So I'm really going to have to go back to the basics, as it were. Maybe not the basics for you, because like I say, putting that aside, that you could do all the shred stuff and then you could do all that. It's like to put that aside and go like, right, I need to just find a chord tone.
Absolutely. I can talk to some of the specifics and I can demonstrate perhaps in just a moment on that regard in terms of how that actually happened. But the other sort of primary goal, if you like, was to have a technique I could improvise with, like to try to work towards a high level of a certain technique that I could improvise with, and the legato stuff was attractive and also very. I felt quite natural that when I'd started working through Tom Quayle's legato stuff, that was a path into that. So into having that thing, and so even within those two big areas that you could spend an entire lifetime, like just playing through changes and legato, those are multiple lifetimes worth of work. But for me, just narrowing it down just like that little bit, so because as I say, 31, it's like I was realistic, pragmatic, and honest with myself about it. Like I don't have the capacity, talent, mental bandwidth, whatever, all the time to be distracted by shiny objects of whatever kind of street picking or alternate picking or country chops or whatever it might be. All these other distractions, like, well, as much as I can enjoy listening to that, I'm mature enough, I think, at that point to not get distracted in terms of unrealistic about being able to actually do any of that stuff. And I found that by narrowing those goals down to these two things, it enabled me to put seriously focused amounts of effort and work into sort of making progress on that. And I think I did over the last 8-9 years. I'm such a radically different player than I was in my 20s, which is perhaps
I'm the same.
Somewhat unique.
Yeah, I think it's good when you start to develop stuff outside maybe your comfort genre, the stuff you listened to as a kid. Because I imagine like me, you probably grew up listening to rock, metal, and stuff like that. So you gravitate towards
blues
this.
And blues and rock and shreddy rock was what I grew up in as a kid. Yeah,
and you kind of get to a point where it's like, well, there must be more going on here, because there's some stuff I'm hearing and notes I'm listening to which doesn't sound, they're not on my fretboard kind of thing. So there must be more out there than just the 3-note per string, Malmsteen, Paul Gilbert kind of thing, which people develop quite early. But it sounds like that you've You know, you have, and you would probably consider now where you are as a player, you can still bring that kind of shreddiness back when you want to, right? It doesn't leave you.
That, it's a good question. I find it hard to bring it back in any kind of in any sort of improvised way,
Hmm.
which is interesting. And I guess this is one of the reasons for wanting to develop a level of technique that I could improvise with, because even when I could do the kind of Steve Vai Dream Theater things note for note, or as close to note for note as I thought I could back when I was a kid, it was still never like useful. I could never like then like some people I've had conversations with many, I've got many great rock shredding friends in the guitar world, and I'm always amazed by how they can take the idea or the kind of rough concept of a lick from and then go and like chunk those together and make something, and improvise with it. And
Yeah.
to me, that never really worked. So when I would learn a Steve Vai piece of music, I would just learn it as a classical musician would. I would just like I would literally sit there and try to get. I mean, it's absolutely insane when I think about it now, because Steve obviously never thinks about it like this. But I tried to actually look at that musical notation and actually fit 17 notes into a single beat, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and really work on that, and I didn't realize back then, no, that's not what he's doing. It's so so no, it was never anything that became musically useful. So I don't think I can bring that back in a way that is in a jamming, improvised sense. I can still play that stuff if I relearn it, and I've
Mm,
made these teeny pockets and things. But I think it was one of the reasons why I wanted to develop a new technique, and it was that I'd never felt comfortable in the first place, going outside of performing tunes or performing solos and things.
for sure.
So
So
maybe,
with going on from like the kind of legato, the topic, which is kind of like a big thing, I know for a lot of people. Um,
mm,
probably people on this channel would want to hear like, how did you, well, where did you first? Because I can't really remember how I kind of wanted to develop it. And obviously, people like Tom have been like a pioneer of that kind of stuff, especially like the new age
absolutely.
stuff, going back from like Holdsworth or Brett Garsed. Um, but did
Mm.
you hear like what was it which initially, you went to that kind of sound? Did you hear someone play, or was it Tom, or was it and you
Oh,
thought, right,
I can
that's
tell
what I
you
want.
absolutely. Yeah, it was
Perfect.
absolutely. I remember this vividly. In fact, the very first time I heard it was it was good. I mean, for a lot of people would be, it was Guthrie,
Mm,
and it was in the moments. It's where he has his moments of um, clarity with subdivision. Whereas, I mean, Guthrie can do seemingly everything to a high level, but there were pockets of on his foot on the Erotic Cakes album, and certainly the Aristocrat stuff too, where he would go into a consistent subdivision and play with that sort of higher level of technique. Whether he
yeah.
might be picking it, he might be legatoing it, but there was this was like mid 2000s, late 2000s, and that was very attractive to me. I remember the kind of breakdown in waves, the kind of clean section where he's kind of playing, it's all kind of breaking down after the craziness and before it recapitulates. And he's got like, I can't remember, is it 16 or 30-second notes? And it's a bubbly kind of clean thing. And I remember learning that and then trying to, this was pre sort of the
I
Tom
know the
stuff,
bit you mean.
thinking,
Yeah.
oh, this is really interesting. I can't do this. This is super hard. This is super controlled. And it's not as fast as the Vai shred stuff, but I can't do it. What's
Mm,
going on here?
mm,
So that was the first window into this different thing. And then I started hearing like Brett Garsed and Alan Hines. And that's when I'd then had discovered, in those like late 2000s, early 2010s, I discovered Tom
hmm.
on YouTube, and all those guys, Rick, Martin.
Yeah.
Um, and the thing that attracted me there was the harmony, was the control over actually doing that sort of type of technique and improvising it through changes, through harmony. And
Yeah.
because of my goal of wanting to do the harmony thing, the changes playing thing, I was really interested in that. So absolutely, it was a combination of all the online stuff. Like the first instance was the Guthrie thing, and then very much Tom's playing in those earlier YouTube days, and then going back in time, as I say, with Alan Hines, Brett Garsed, Alan Holdsworth, of course, and all those guys have that ability to play in the more with more clarity to their rhythmics, their timing and their rhythmic subdivisions. That I find really appealing, which is kind of coming more down the side of the kind of jazz family tree. I mean, a lot of jazz rhythms are very based within eighth notes, eighth note triplets, maybe double time 16th notes, but having a very much not just kind of like moving the fingers as fast as you can in a vague kind of tonal center, but having clarity to
in a flurry,
the rhythm and the notes and the chord tones and the outlining the harmony that you're trying to play. And even if it's not moving harmony, even if it's just static, just having that, having a clarity to the notes that you're playing with the rhythm. In some ways, that can sometimes sound faster in some ways as well. It's like, even though it's not, there's less notes per second. Just the fact that there is such, can be such control over it. Over the subdivision gives it this illusion of it being a lot faster than it is. And it's certainly a very nice, I think, a very appealing kind of sound. That's how I got into it and got obsessed, in terms of developing it over the last, 6 years or so.
The journey never ends, doesn't it? I know. I remember Tom coming down, so I'm in Plymouth, and he did a masterclass in Plymouth. And that was the first time I'd seen someone up close and play with that, that timing precision of legato, just fluid, 16th notes and 32nd notes. So I was just like, this guy. And he wasn't really, that must have been 2010, like we're saying. So maybe
similar time to when
yeah. And then I think from then, obviously he's become a lot more well known in considering, what you see on YouTube or Instagram now. He's the kind of the pioneer, right, of that. The legato.
It's the gold standard in terms of learning this stuff as well. I absolutely can't lay claim to any.
Yeah, I don't know that.
The reaction. I don't. Yeah, I'm
perfect timing.
Whatever. So I can't lay claim to in any way figuring this stuff out. I mean, there are pockets of things here and there, but very much I've gone and learned from all different legato players, and very much the mechanics, certainly the raw mechanics of the technique. I got, in fact, I found the receipt the other week or month, all that time ago. The top, when I bought the tutorial from Tom's website, the Modern Legato series, that was spent. Absolutely helped me. Oh yeah, in terms of learning the mechanics of it. And Tom is the gold standard. Is one of those guys where the explanation and the teaching is as strong as the playing, which is incredibly useful for anyone wanting to sort of learn concepts and things. So, but yeah, I mean, there's that. So I suppose musically, I've then transcribed a whole bunch of people as well. All the names I've just mentioned, because the legato thing is so kind of appealing to me, to use musically in an improvising sense.
You feel comfortable using that technique with the hybrid picking, kind of that's where you feel your flow is kind of best.
Can you? I don't know why that keeps.
I don't know. That's popping up. Is that
sorry?
If that's
let me see if I can turn that off.
It must whatever you're saying.
Let me turn. Oh, it's okay. It's a thing on the app on the Mac or whatever. It does I think you can get fireworks and things. So if I really drop
that would be the end.
Bomb. Anyway,
mic drop.
So hybrid picking. That's ultimately how it comes out in terms of legato and hybrid picking.
Yeah, you've kind of all gone organically. Was that a conscious decision? I need to know how to hybrid pick, or was it just kind of, as time's gone by, you've sort of kind of developed it naturally?
No, it came out through. I think if you follow through the Tom's Modern Legato 1 tutorial, it kind of lays the mechanics for both the left and right hand. So I guess many people will think of, legato being left hand or fretting hand primarily. But I think there is this, when you start going really down deep with the rabbit hole of this stuff, it is as important what the right hand is doing as the left, because so much of the goal, I think, is trying to minimize pick attack, minimize the actual. You're trying to make what the right hand is doing as close to the sound tonally as what the left hand is doing. So in terms of pre-placement and planting the pick and the finger, so you're shaving off the front end of the attack, that can make it sound more like a hammer or pull off. So all those things beyond the initial mechanics, which I just followed, through Tom's Legato Part 1, I guess say it's excellent. That laid the groundwork foundation for me. Then, when I'm coming up with things or improvising and just starting to think very deeply about just what the right hand is doing and trying to make it sound as close to the left hand as possible. So then there is this, hopefully, in theory, there is this seamless just flow of notes, and you can't tell where you change string, you can't tell where you've changed position. It's just a continual endless stream of notes when trying to create that sound.
I see.
And it's not obviously always successful, but that's the kind of thinking behind the right hand. Now, other people, of course, like I think Alan finds, I don't think he's hybrid picking much. I think he's using the pick. Another good friend of ours, John Cordy, who's another great legato player. He doesn't do the hybrid picking thing. But to me, it's just about the sound that I'm going for, and that this particular sound is trying to make it all just as consistent and as smooth and as possible. And
it's crazy how much normal picking, like alternate picking or economy picking or anything like that, has for me kind of messed mine up because of just the whole hybrid picking thing. I just do it as a second. Kind of it's natural for me now, and it just works for me in the way I would want to play. But it's just it's weird how you can develop to certain techniques a lot easier and they feel more natural. Like for me, going back to the rock thing years ago, I was never good sweep pick or anything like that, even though I wanted to. It's that wasn't I couldn't really do it. It's not really my thing. But it's funny how the hybrid picking, it just kind of came naturally. And it seems like with your playing now, it's because you're playing so smooth and your lines flow. It works for you. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it, kind of thing.
Like I say, on a good day, it's that's the idea. But it's interesting actually listening to you play, because I think I would say we don't know each other that well, but it seems like there's potentially a similar crossover in terms of things you've looked at and studied, and certainly, watching your right hand seems like it's a very natural, organic part of how you just play generally now, which I think is what you're getting at with me, and that is
right,
it for me as well. It's it's so built in. I can't. So, for example, recently I was relearning the Gary Moore "Still Got the Blues" solo,
right,
and I was playing that, and even to the point where it's more comfortable for me towards the back end of that solo for some of the more sort of up the neck kind of things. I'm kind of hybrid picking aspects of that because I just can't. I can't do that kind of ferocious right hand picking thing. I can in those instances I can sort of insert I'm not I can strip out the smoothness and insert some sort of more ferocity and aggression into the hybrid thing, but I don't have the raw right hand. It's so especially for that kind of. Well, Petrucci not so much. The Petrucci is a bit more. That's a bit just more like brute force go. But for the sort of tune-up string blues rock, hard rock kind of phrasing.
Okay, I see what you mean.
That kind of picking and thing is the Bonamassa, all that kind of sort of
I get you.
thing. Eric Johnson, whatever. That's just not. So I have to to do that stuff now and play those kind of things. I have to kind of fake it with and use this organic, this hybrid approach. And like I say, given my narrowing of goals and this kind of trying to let go of the ego and the kind of desire to want to be best at everything, which is obviously ridiculous. It becomes easy to do. I can just think that's okay. I can do what I can do, and I enjoy what I can do, and I want to keep pushing and getting better at that. But I don't feel the need that I've got to go and be able to pick it like Gary Moore or Eric Johnson or
Yeah,
Paul
yeah,
Messer. I don't feel like I don't have that calling to think like I've got to now be able to do that. I've
yeah,
found things that I have a deep, long-term relationship goal with for the rest of my life, in terms of jazz and improvising and this
yeah.
kind of legato thing. So, well, I don't know. Maybe that will change one day, but as I say,
No, no,
at the
no, it's
moment, I'm
what you
pretty,
say, and I think that's the kind of
I'm on
pressure
a path. Yeah.
for maybe modern guitarists. I say modern, as in like these young cats coming up, and social media, which I'd probably like to get your thoughts on as well. But like I know I've struggled with that kind of, we talked about it earlier, like imposter syndrome, not feeling not good enough to the point where what am I doing?
Yeah.
Um, and the way you know, the guitar community, I say, has changed with the online thing. Now I don't know, it can set a fire in me sometimes and be like, right, let's get it out. But sometimes it can be, you know, if I was a young guitarist coming up and seeing some of the guys who can, highly edit stuff and do all this kind of,
Hmm.
do you know what I mean? Without naming anyone, but it can be sort of detrimental to their own kind of mental health and their own guitar playing. I don't know if you've had similar thoughts to that with the whole social media kind of thing and guitarists.
Yeah. Social media. Wow, what a topic.
Yeah,
I've
in a
got,
sentence, please.
yeah, like, yeah, in a sentence. So I came about at a time that was kind of healthy for me. I guess I started doing things online, and I say the first guitar video live streams with Tom and stuff like. So that was the 2016 sort of time, and that was just when live streaming was becoming a thing.
Mm,
And it was before I think things started to get incredibly destructive with
mm,
social media. And I kind of really enjoyed it. I went through. I've alluded to this. I wasn't going to go particularly into it. I say I'd go in detail within the guitar episode I talked about, but I did have serious difficulties with my mental health in the mid
mm.
2000 teens, so sort of 15, 16, 17. Yeah, off of the back of many things, but a huge
Yeah.
thing was this, regret and shame and like
Hmm.
thing, the existential crisis I had in my early 30s,
Sure.
which really did kick off some real difficulties with depression and anxiety. And I actually found that the kind of live streaming thing really helps that, because uh, it was like a way of just not worrying about, just letting the camera roll and just
Yeah.
practicing, basically just practicing to people, like just for my own benefit. And that helped steady a lot of the kind of helped like exercise a lot of demons and
Yes.
stop worrying so much about things. And so I on the one hand, I found it quite helpful and useful, the kind of sort aspects of social media in that time. I think in the intervening years, um, it's changed several times.
Hmm.
And I think the point we are in now, yeah, I mean, there's a whole raft of criticisms, cans of worms we could open with this. We've been through many sort of dramas and just in the guitar social media world, Um, I think the one of the big changes has been this. Um, a lot of the things perhaps you and I have strived for and was influenced by in the early 2010s with this kind of high level of improvising
Yeah.
and changes playing and the kind of fusion-ish kind of jazz inspired kind of world of electric guitar. That's kind of, I'm going to say it's gone away, but it's it's sort of morphed into something that's a lot more perhaps influenced from that kind of the prog world and
Mm.
very much not improvised and very much
Yeah.
about the perfect. It's very much like you alluded to it there in terms of editing and fixing and
Mm.
whole things that have gone on. And now I think the goal, I don't even think people really care anymore whether it's
They don't know any
but
better,
the
do they?
goalposts have shifted so much like that now, a lot of people don't even care if it's sort of really played or not,
Yeah.
let alone whether it was, improvised or not. So I think there's just the expectations of so much. It's weird, like we're living in this sort of fantasy Emperor's New Clothes kind of
Mm.
world within the sort of, well, not just guitar, but just social media in general. And I think
Yeah.
it's very, yeah, probably not get too fixated or focused on it, which as a 41-year-old guy, it's easier to do. I guess if I was, I can't imagine what it would have been like if I was my like early 20s now.
Yeah.
That would feel, and I had very different goals to what I have now. Yeah, like if my goal was to become some, yeah, that would be probably quite detrimental to mental health, and it wouldn't be a positive thing. But overall, generally, my experience with the bits of social media I have dabbled in like the podcasts and things, and with what I've done, I found it quite enjoyable and beneficial. A lot of my relationships, as I say, in terms of other musicians, other guitar players, has come about through this world.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't have the connections and the friendships and the relationships without that. So I'm very grateful to that.
It's the good
But
and
I'm
the
just
bad,
glad it
isn't it?
happened. Absolutely, that's it. I'm just glad it happened. I was already at my lowest point, I guess you could say. Um, so in, as I say, 2016, 15, was the lowest point in terms of my unhappiness with the instrument and my
Yeah.
life at the time. So it was the only way was up at that point, as I was making those corrective changes to my playing and musicianship and stuff. So, yeah, but I think if I was like, if I was like 18, 19, 20 something now, then I'm not sure where my head would be at with it all. It seems like yeah, a really,
It's difficult, isn't it?
yeah.
Because like you said there about improvisation is a big tool. It's such a massive skill, and as you know, like playing something and then improvising something it's so different. To be able to play something back, like you talked about, like a classical musician, and then like
Mm.
improvise over this or improvising this in real time in front of these people over these changes. It's a different skill. And then I think, when you get social media and people are saying this is an improvised solo, and then you can clearly, no, it's not. And your video, by the way, was perfect where you took three solos. I don't know if you remember this going back, and then you write which one's written and
Yeah.
which one's, but you've got to the level where your improvisation is kind of up near where the written stuff is. So it's very hard to tell. But I think sometimes you can tell apart some
Can't get,
guitarists.
but like, yeah, absolutely. But I think what I did in the follow up to that, or in the chat, I can't remember where it was, where I analyzed it or something, was I it was very much clear to say like it's also context dependent as well for me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I can still like, even as being as trying to be as honest as I can, I know there are certain tempos and certain progressions that I'm going to sound better on when I improvise. I
Yeah,
know that my
for
my
sure.
improvised legato is going to that kind of 90 BPM to 100 BPM is going to be really great for
The sweet
16th note
spot.
triplets, and I can do that all
Yeah.
day. There's a certain so again, it's like I don't want to be too like it's it's still context dependent. So um yeah, I find it like I just again just being brutally honest with myself as I try to tend to be like I don't want to try and pretend like I'm some kind of I'm perfect on all this. Absolutely not. I've got my still all the time got my
That's cool. You can see that, like, you
yeah.
can take yourself out of that sort of player mentality. And I think I read something like Guthrie as well. Like, he hates listening back to his stuff. He can't listen to it apparently. And if that's
Mm.
him saying it, it's like, well, you know,
Uh, there is a certain yeah. I mean, I sort of. I mean, many people. I think Holdsworth was also very, and those guys are so good. Like, I mean, it's beyond what I've ever. Like, I'm really quite. I don't want to sound complacent or content with this, but I'm quite like I'm so like grateful that I've managed to achieve what I have achieved in the
mm,
last 8 years. That like um like I want to keep pushing and I want to get better, but I'm under no illusions I'm ever going to be a great. So it doesn't matter. So it's like it's so out the question that I don't have anything to really stress or worry about in the day to day. Or like so I can listen back to my stuff and be like try to be like as try to be as centered as I can about it. Like
mm.
um And maybe that is one of the things that prevent me from, you know, maybe it takes a certain kind of mindset or character to be that way, but that's not me. I'm just, I've just found a way of being very happy picking up the guitar and enjoying it.
That's nice.
And
It's a good
and
place to
that's
be.
well, yeah, because that had to be the goal. That had to be coming out of that wilderness period of that sort of 10 whatever year, 12-year period of being so beaten down and in a bad place with it. Like that had to be the ultimate reason for doing it.
Mm.
It couldn't be about career, it couldn't be about anything. It had to be, how do I get back to a place where I actually genuinely am in love with this thing?
Mm.
And that thankfully is, I don't know how, I don't know what it was, but some switch was flipped in my brain where started to find great enjoyment and satisfaction from practicing like very boring, simple things. Because when you can do that, and when you can find that enjoyment, then it becomes incredibly easy to sit down for 3 hours and practice the really useful, difficult stuff.
Yeah. Yes.
So
No.
all the things I had to do to learn the fretboard in the way that I now know it takes time, it takes application, it takes effort, it takes all the stuff that people really kind of struggle with. And one of the things that thankfully I was able to do is to find enjoyment in that. If you don't find enjoyment in it, you won't do it. It's very hard to
Hard
marshal
slog. Yeah.
the discipline. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So that's why I think I was lucky with, yeah, super lucky.
so going on, obviously we talked at the start about the solo app, and which you own with Tom Quayle. So how did
Yep.
that, if we talk about that for a moment, so how did that idea
Yeah.
come about? And yeah, just tell us from the start what was the process in getting
Sure.
that going?
So the solo app was the result of a bit of a failed guitar show trip. We went down to London late 2019. We often do these sort of road trips and we start chatting, discussing ideas, usually having an argument about something, and for fun. And
Hmm.
but we'd kind of gone down to this London guitar show, and we'd left a bit early, and it was kind of been a bit of a washout. It was particularly that great. And on the way back, we were just talking about the fretboard visualization thing, and this is something that is deep passion of mine, and certainly Tom's as well. And we were discussing the ideas and the merits of like, well, what if there was a way to kind of, because in my lessons when I'm teaching people on Zoom, I'm basically doing the process of what solo does, but just in back and forth to the
Yeah.
student. So I'm
Yeah.
guiding and directing and sort of testing and manipulating the student in a way that is forcing them in real time to visualize and find this stuff on the fretboard. And so the idea was, well, what if there was an app that could kind of listen to you and train you to do that and visualize that in a way that
Yeah.
both Tom and I kind of think and teach this stuff. And that was like the lightning in a bottle, kind of like, wow, this okay, so it must already exist. And then within the research of like, no, nobody's done this yet. And partially because it's a relatively unique way of geometrically thinking about the fretboard. Like I mean, thinking intervallically is not, but thinking in the very like cataloged way that I mapped it out. I mean, I think the genesis of this goes back to Wayne Krantz, I think, in terms of Tom thinking about it, and the Improviser's OS thinking in terms of generic numbers.
Great book, that. Yeah.
Tom then thinking about it in terms of his fourth tuning and the discrete kind of geometric shapes, and then I took that and ran with it and catalogued it and worked out this way of teaching it and thinking about it in standard tuning that kind of boiled this down to like, the Douglas Adams, the key to the universe is, what is it, 42?
That's
well, mine would be 48. When I think about the fretboards, there are literally just 48 2-point geometric shapes that you can map the entire thing with, like in play anything, any key, anywhere, and these 48 2-point shapes. And so that was it was having a way of kind of training someone to think about that and kind of not explicitly do that, within the app, but to kind of get someone going down those roads of thinking developically and making these connections in terms of geometric shapes is was the kind of the real goal of it. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was, and because of that slight more unique way of thinking about it, it not been done. We've not sent anyone to do that.
So unique. So unique. And I
And then
think
it was a case of
go on, sorry.
sorry, go ahead. No, and then I was just going to say, then it was a case of, well, how the hell do we make this a reality? Because neither of us are
I was going to ask.
coders or weren't, you know, and we're still not really, but we know a lot more now than we did 3 years ago. So,
Well, I think, you know, for the app, obviously not just saying this, but it is a groundbreaking app, isn't it? For musicians, guitarists. If you don't,
well, any musician really,
yeah,
it doesn't even have to be
exactly.
just getting someone to think intervallically or ear training as well. I mean, you can use it for ear training. So when we were developing and testing the app, and the software engineer and business partner Mike would send like a test build through in the middle of the night. He lives in the US, so like time zones and everything was a challenge. So I would get like a test build on my phone come up, and I'd be in bed in the morning and I didn't have a guitar next to me. So in order to test the feature that he was working on, I would just sing into it to test it. And that then got me thinking, well, holy crap, this is to be an amazing way to train your audiation and your ears. Because if you're singing into it and then you've got to like audiate the distance in pitch, then you're thinking about the intervals within your voice box and your ears and your head, and it's an amazing way to ear train as well. So it's I don't want to sort of like, sounds like I know it's the idea, you know, you should blow your own horn and promote this stuff, but it really did
go for it.
it really did seem like, oh, this is something incredibly useful, really useful.
Well, and I think as well, what appeals, I think, to everyone is that you don't have to be you can be a beginner just trying to learn the notes on the fretboard, right? Just to be able to, because it'll tell you to play a note, you can play it back, tells you if you're correct, but you can go as advanced as you want, and you've got settings within the app to make, you know, for instance, over altered chords, you dominant phrygian, or you know, the altered scale. You've got different, you know, it's branching out within the app, which is crazy, and that was on the first release. Okay, if that's correct, but
I'm so, you know, we were so blown away by the success of the app. It's been the single greatest thing I've ever worked on, and you know, in terms of like job satisfaction. And I don't have an album as such, you know, I don't like, so to have this thing that you kind of work on and really passionately, you know, create and release, it's incredible. And then it's been very successful too, and the feedback's been amazing. We've had people using it all over the world in all institutions. We've got, you know, people doing their theses on it. It's like become this thing which is like, it's kind of gone way beyond just the guitar thing as well. So beyond my audience, beyond Tom's audience, it's gone onto this because of the way the App Store is in terms of it's just hundreds and hundreds of millions of people using it all the time. Obviously, that goes beyond people that even know, you know, who Tom is. So it's like taken on this, and it's kind of other kind of life that. But very much the initial first release was just about Tom and I kind of thinking about a way of training and teaching the way that we think about it. But it was still very much for us and ourselves to practice with as well. So we kind of had a very biased intermediate to advanced view, you know, kind of idea to make. So we've definitely received feedback, you know, constructive criticism of how we can improve that in terms of beginners onboarding it. And I can't speak too much to that because we've got some very exciting big things coming up with new versions. So that's
cool. You're still developing it, and it's still you still want to push that on.
The next big version, iOS version, is locked down, and in fact, I'm working all next week filming bits and pieces with Tom for that. So can't give release date, and I can't just talk about features, but we're absolutely still working on it. It's the pace has slowed down because when we were working on the first version, we had the idea in November 2019.
Wow, yeah.
We then stumbled through the process of, you know, we met our developer, software engineer, started the company, and then we started work on the app in March 2020. And what else happened in March 2020?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so basically we had nothing else to do. Like nobody had anything else to do. So we basically spent 9 months from March to 2020 to January 2021,
Wow.
just like pretty much 7 days a week, just working on Zoom, like between the three of us, between Tom, me, and Mike, on Zoom calls for 7, 8 hours a day, and
Bloody
just
hell.
working non-stop on the thing. So that's how we were able to take it from idea to finished release in
So
nine
you
months.
accelerated from the
Now,
idea very quickly, sounds like.
yeah, and the way that the it could only happen. We were incredibly fortunate to discover Mike Patty, who's extremely talented software engineer in Portland, and he was actually a listener to the podcast, to the Guitar Hour
Right.
podcast,
Okay.
and it was just one of those coincidence, fate, whatever coincidences, where 2 weeks after Tom and I had that discussion in the car coming back from the London Guitar Show,
Yeah.
where we had the idea to do this, Mike was listened to an episode of the Guitar Hour podcast where I was talking about like making a bunch of ear training backing tracks on the show I was doing, like for ear training. And he sent us an email to the podcast saying, introducing himself and saying, by the way, if you ever want to make an app of that ear training thing, let me know. And this was 2 weeks after Tom and I had this idea for solo. So I would reply back to Mike saying, "Oh, this is awesome. We don't want to do this ear training, but we've got this
Ah,
idea."
the stars
And
aligned.
yeah, and so that's how it happened. And so we were incredibly fortunate and then we ended up forming a great friendship with Mike, and and to the point where it turned out that we were all happy to kind of set up a company and do it that way
That's
around. And
incredible.
so because of that nature of the friendship and the working partnership that we had, it enabled us, like Mike had to have this crash course in jazz harmony. And I mean,
Yeah, it's not the
Mike
easiest
does
thing
play
to
guitar.
understand, is it? In the
Well, this is the thing. So it's one of those the symbiotic kind of like the transfer of skills here. We had to work in such a way that um, it couldn't have worked any other way. So Mike had to have this crash course in sort of music theory, jazz harmony.
Right.
Tom and I had to have a crash course in sort of Xcode and JSON and programming, and trying to learn as much as we could, because the only way that it could actually be created was by this transfer of skills, for us to be able to impart what needs to be Mike to do, and for Mike to be able to, without that kind of two-way understanding, it couldn't have happened. So we were incredibly lucky, I say, really fortunate and lucky that that it happened like that. Otherwise, we probably would have had to have gone to a third party, one of those app companies that kind of, it would either had to have, I just can't see how it happened,
It
because
worked
the
first time.
complexity of what
Yeah.
we were trying to do, like it's like the example I use to explain the difficulty is like, within coding, you're constantly trying to like, streamline things and have like very sort of organized, methodical, logical things.
Mm.
So if you're trying to like make sense of a scale,
Yeah.
and you say that generally speaking that like, we have the major scale, we have 7 notes. You can number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Mm.
So then the intervals of that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But if we take like the altered scale, for example, so the altered scale goes root, flat 9, sharp 9, 3.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that means that the 3 is the fourth note in the scale.
Mm.
So you have to account for that. And all of these things become like, so normally a scale like the second degree is the second interval, the third is the third note in the scale. So how you kind of account for this in sort of programming is it becomes exceedingly complex.
Oh, I
And
can
for
imagine.
Mike to be able to sort of explain that to Mike, to say like, well, Mike,
Yeah.
no, because so for this scale, Mike, the altered scale, the the third of the scale isn't the third
Is it
note in the
the
scale.
yeah.
So in the altered scale, the third is the fourth note in the scale. So how do we get?
He
So
basically
we
thought you
had,
were winding him up.
yeah, exactly. So Mike, now Mike is, super smart to be able to figure that out, and we can work this out. But he had to understand why the fourth note in the scale of the altered scale
Yeah,
is the third.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
and
yeah.
then the solo has to understand this and how that maps to the chords and to the harmony and everything going on. So the complexity of this thing is really
Right
quite
on.
insane.
Well, I was saying because
It
it's
was
so user friendly as well. The app is so user friendly. So how you bottled it into that kind of simple chord comes up. Okay, I want to target the third of each chord. Like it's genius.
well,
How
we
it
had to
gets.
strip that away from the user because the user of the app doesn't need to know anything about the harmony. They don't. You could kind of learn that through osmosis of going through the exercises and the songs and things.
Hmm.
But the idea for the app is not to learn the songs. It's not to really even learn the scales and such. You can do that, but the whole point to the app is to learn to see, visualize the fretboard. It's to learn the harmony. It's to
Yeah,
hear the harmony. It's to see the
absolutely.
harmony. And you don't need to understand that as such to be able to see that. Um, so yeah, we wanted to abstract that away from the user. So the user doesn't need to, the user could just pick any set of changes. And so long as they understand the core concept of what intervals are, intervallic functions are, and then, they can spend as long as they need finding that, excuse me, finding them on the fretboard. Because
Hmm.
I think one of the other really, really strong, important things that we did with solo was to isolate the skill of finding stuff away from time and rhythm.
Mm.
Um, and so I remember when I was figuring this, when I was trying to, learn to play changes and learn to visualize in the fretboard, um, guitar players have this issue where like the fingers will move faster than the brain will. So, and that can be good technically. And
Mm.
if your ears are awesome and you've got really, really strong ears, then that kind of doesn't matter whether you're
Mm.
aware, unconscious, or understanding or seeing.
Yeah,
But if they're not, then what's your on ramp? How do you get to that? And so I think if you isolate this one skill of just learning to kind of see how do things fit together geometrically and on the fretboard, and don't have the time-based pressure of rhythm, and you just we're parking that for a moment,
hmm,
then I think it's an incredibly useful way to practice.
yeah,
Obviously, all those things are important, and obviously, rhythm and time and
for sure.
everything is important. But the point of the solo app was this one singular, isolated skill of visualization, and as I said earlier on, like hearing as well in terms of ear training
You're training, yeah.
and audiating. But yeah, like that's so some people have asked in terms of feedback and requesting things of like, could you make it so you'd have backing tracks element to it, or you have bars and beats and things, and really, I mean, I suppose we could go down that route, but it would sort of be at odds with the core philosophy of what it's trying to do, because
Yeah,
it's trying to say, just put the brakes on, hey, because the app is staring at you, you're staring at the app, and it's saying there's an A root note and it wants you to find the sharp four, and it's listening for you to play the sharp four. Now you can take as long as it takes.
mm.
You can sit there until the battery runs out on your phone, staring at your A root notes and visualizing where those
And
sharp
just
fours
seeing
are.
where it is, yeah.
And I think that is the power. That's the beautiful. I think that's really is the beauty of what it's trying to do. Um, it's not making you run before you can walk with it. So yeah, that's
No,
a
that's
really
a
strong
really good
aspect to
point.
it.
And if you did want to, I guess, if you wanted to put on a click whilst you're doing it, you
Yeah,
can do that. Add it to yourself. You know.
absolutely. Yeah. And that's it. It will expand and grow exactly like you just said. If you wish to,
Hmm.
you can, as the user, as your skills improve with this and as someone's more advanced, you can put the rhythm to it. You can put time-based
Yeah,
time to it. But the
yeah.
app is not going to force you to do that and get you tripping over yourself quicker than you can, running before you can walk with it. Um,
No,
yeah.
yeah, and I think that's there's a no pressure to the learning of it. Then, isn't it? It's like you go at your own pace,
Yeah.
and
That was the goal. Yeah.
everyone I think who's wanting to get into changes and even just learn your basic triads, major and minor triads, and diminished. It's a great place to, and it gives you such a heads up because there's so much confusion. I think with topics like this and the visualization and what's best. And like people ask me and my students, like, what's the best way to visualize? And it's just like over after a time, you have your own method and knowing. But the solo app helps you reinforce that kind of groundwork that you've done, and we can all improve with that. I guess it never ends, like you said about the visualization thing. It's such a fascinating topic that you can never ever finish it. You complete it.
It never ends. Absolutely. And we can, both Tom and I can load up solo, and neither of us are particularly I mean, the scales are in there, like, harmonic minor modes are all in there, and it's like neither of us are particularly, solid on all the melodic harmonic minor modes. So I can
Yeah.
bring stuff up on there and challenge myself all the time. In fact, I was absolutely using it I got really into the harmonic major modes, or certain harmonic major modes last year, and I was just shedding that all the time, just using it. So it's totally can push and, you're
Yeah.
as far as advanced as you get, will push you. Yeah, I think it's one of those things that I'm incredibly proud of, and feel like it's
I bet.
it's useful as well as being cool. So.
Yeah, that's so. I don't know if you want to do any sort of playing, or if you've got a bit of time at the end. But like, how would you, if we're going on from the solo up, you get a lot of people on. It's a fascinating topic with the changes or the legato thing. How would you advise maybe someone who's starting? Maybe they've got a bit of, they're not total beginners, but they have some knowledge. Well, not knowledge of the fretboard, but they've got some good technique. But they want to advance their playing of how to play over the changes. Have you got anything that you would say start with? How would you go about it? And it's quite broad.
Yeah,
But
well, get the solo out.
yeah, number one is get the
But
solo out.
yeah, and yeah, so I mean, some of the things. I mean, maybe this is useful to sort of talk sort of a little bit more about then how I was making. So the very very first thing I would recommend that people do, and this is ask yourself the question. This is exactly what I said to myself in the mirror 9 years ago. Was, well, do I know the notes on the fretboard? And this is a really like ego challenging thing to answer, like, because at that point I was 30 and I've been playing supposedly professionally for X number of years.
Yeah.
I've been through music college, and it's really difficult to admit that you don't know the notes on the fretboard. and this is, like you said about that ego thing. And I could read music. I'd learned classical music. I could, and when I say know the notes on the fretboard, I mean know them like really, really, really know them. Because in order for the solo app, or for the intervals thing to work, everything is kind of anchored around knowing exactly what root notes it is that you're thinking from. So for me, absolutely, it was a case of like just being honest about it. Like, if I'm looking down, is it all lit up instantly? And so there's somewhat of a party trick or whatever that I do with students to kind of explain this, was just play random notes on the fretboard and just say them out loud, to demonstrate just how clear this is. So D, G sharp. Oh, that's a very, very delayed sound. B, G sharp, D sharp, D flat, F sharp, A flat, G, C, D flat, B flat, F sharp, G, B flat, B, G, F sharp, D, E, F. So every single note that I'm playing is instantly, I know what notes the notes are. Yeah. And when I was making these sort of adjustments and changes, and I was burning it all down, like, it was acknowledging that I couldn't do that back then. Right. I couldn't look down and have this instant connection between my brain and fingers what the note was. Yeah. So that was the first thing I needed to correct. And the way that I did that, and maybe this is, and I sort of teach this in my sort of Pathways to Jazz courses that you can get from my website. But one of the, I'll teach this exercise now if it's useful to anyone, was to take the cycle of fifths. And I guess that requires some understanding, but if you understand the cycle of fifths, that you can put the major scale, put the major key in a circle around a clock, going around fifths or fourths. I'm not going to go beyond that, explaining that now, but to just play through the cycle of fifths, the major scales, and say the notes out loud as you're looking at the fretboard. So what I did was I blocked off, say, from fret 4 to fret 9, and I would sort of limit myself between this area of the neck. And then I would start with C major and then look down at my hand and I would force myself to say the note, then play it as I'm looking. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Reverse it back down, again, saying it out loud.
Yeah.
Now I'm not thinking of a shape. I'm not thinking of a box. I'm literally thinking of what the notes are, the raw, pure notes and where they fall. Now, the next thing would be to go around one step on the circle. So this would be to G major. And rather than, and so then when I would come back down all the way to the lowest note, down to the A, say, just like between my zone limit here, from when I got down to this lowest note, my brain would shift to think of G major scale.
Yeah.
And then I would then play up through exactly the same way, but change all the Fs to F sharps, because then that would make it G major.
Yeah.
So I'm now going A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B. Again, I'm looking at my hand, I'm saying the notes.
Yes.
And I'm just going through. And then what happens is, as you do that and you go around the circle, you're gradually adding in one accidental each time, but all the others are staying the same. So you're gradually learning where all of these notes are for all of the 12 major scales. So what you're doing is you're kind of learning all 12 major scales, and you're learning where those notes are in a very thorough way on the fretboard.
Yeah.
You could also go backwards around the cycle and do it in the cycle of fourths. So you start doing the flats first. But that as an exercise for me was incredibly useful.
Yeah.
It was transformative, because it really completely plugged all of those. It allowed me to then, look in the mirror and say, yes, I really do know where all the notes are on the fretboard instantly. And so between the positions there, do it from frets 4 to 9. I would also do it from, say, again, from like 1 to 5 or 9 to 13.
Yeah.
Again, just like finding where all of the white notes are on the piano, basically. It's essentially, you're just trying to, first of all, see where all of the white notes are, all of the non-sharps and flats. And then you build in where those sharps and flats are, gradually, as you say, going around the cycle. And that, to me, was the first step to very thoroughly understanding where all of the notes are, not having to do like the octave trick to sort of find out what that was, or not having to do. Now, this is an exercise. It's something I've found extremely useful. Many of my students have. I don't think you have to do it. You can do other ways. You can set the solo app up in ways that can kind of sort of imitate some of this stuff. You can do, there's a whole bunch of exercises for learning your root notes, I guess you can do. The reason I like my thing here is because it's incredibly thorough, and it forces you can't kind of cheat. You can't really, if you're honest and disciplined with yourself, then your brain is in gear all the time, because you're having to say it out loud, and you're connecting your mouth to the fretboard in a way that allows you, it forces you to not let your brain turn off. And one of the first things that you can do with any kind of exercise or guitar-based exercises, we're all lazy, and if we can shut our brain off, we will. And then you're not actually thinking about it, or sort of, I would argue, perhaps not learning it. So by vocalizing what you're doing out loud, and by looking at your hand and going through in this sort of systematic, methodical way around the cycle of fifths, learning all the natural notes, gradually introducing the sharps, gradually introducing the flats. As an exercise, you can do that in 5, 10, whatever minutes it might be, and I think it's a really it parachutes you, and you escape from this trap of thinking, well, my major scale is this box, this 3-note per string pattern, or it's this box pattern, and And if somebody was to ask me at any point, well, what note am I playing, or what in this, I know instantly. So if
Mhm.
I'm thinking of A flat major, I just know where all the notes are. I mean, intervallically, I think about this now intervallically, but I still would know all of this for A flat major is like every point along the way. You stop me at E flat, C, D flat, B flat, A flat, G, F, C, E flat.
Yeah.
I can't physically say it out loud, but it's all up there if going through my brain if I let it be.
Yeah. 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 You've got
And
it's there if you need it.
yeah, exactly. It's all it all kind of is occurring from all that kind of programming at the very back of my brain. So I don't think about this when I'm phrasing and being music and trying to be musical or whatever. But the underlying framework of how I sort of got there was not having to depend upon larger structures I don't understand. Like when we learn our traditional, if I play it as a 3-note per string pattern, when I first learned this, I knew the start note and I knew the end note.
Yeah.
And if you asked me what anything was in between, I could work it out, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't be instant.
Yeah.
It would be like I'd have to trigger the muscle pattern of the 3-note per string in order to then count through and think, okay, well, that's an F. That's an F. So I would say that having that instantaneous access to the knowledge of the notes that you're playing is the first step to this. And I'm not saying that you've got to master, have this exercise mastered before you can go into doing other things with the intervals or whatever. Not at all. All of these things can be worked on sort of, in the same sort of same time or in parallel. But it's absolutely the crucial cornerstone of being able to then think about, well, okay, so if this is my A flat, then how do I see everything else? Well, here's my 7, here's my 6, here's my 5, here's my 6.
Yes, you're seeing everything from the root. And I think
absolutely.
It's really shocking, actually, isn't it? Like the amount of guitarists like who don't know the notes, on the fretboard.
Well, it's not shocking really to me because I was one of them. I didn't know. I was
okay,
one of them.
Maybe people you would assume would know, but they don't. Yeah. And that's like, well, it's crazy.
Well, again, let's be context dependent. Like, I want to be fair here and say, like, it's only relevant if you are finding it a hindrance or an obstacle to playing the way that you want to play. So if you're a blues guy and you're a rock guy and you are totally content in the world you are and you don't find any challenges or you're not, frustrated by it, then maybe you don't. And this is the beautiful thing about the guitar. We can, as guitar players, we can learn this box and we can start making music with it. We don't have to, like every other instrument has to learn their notes. We don't have to do that.
I guess if it's not limiting to what you want to do on the guitar, then
exactly.
But if you do want to context improvise and do jazz or fusion, then I guess like 100%.
Yeah, the big thing for me was like being articulate with harmony going by and like outlining, like, because that's where it breaks down. Unless you've got amazing ears, naturally sort of orally gifted, then a lot of these large boxes, structures aren't manipulable. You can't manipulate them fast enough or with enough clarity to be able to sound like the chords that you're trying to play over. And it just, you can't memorize that much stuff. Like to memorize, I mean, it's thousands upon thousands of large patterns and structures that then become impossible to wield, musically speaking. So so for me, it absolutely was relevant into the end goals I was trying to achieve. I wanted to be able to, as I said, like be able to play through chord changes, to be able to improvise through kind of jazz standards and common progressions and things, which I could never do back when I was at college. And so for me, it was very, very important to be able to think, know the note names, know the root note names all over the neck, be able to then think of the intervals and see the intervals. But it totally, I'm not saying that everybody has to do this, and like I don't want to be criticizing of anyone if they are happy playing the way they're playing and it doesn't hold them back. Then you don't have to do any of this stuff. It's just it
is fun though.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's addictive because
Oh
I've
man, I
got to
know.
the point where it's, if I didn't have any other responsibilities, then I would nothing more in the world than I'd love to do than just sit down and play real book roulette and
Oh my God, yeah.
and
Yeah,
just
no,
and then
it's
just like practice. Yeah.
and
Mm.
alongside that, obviously you talked about developing your legato. So how would you intertwine that, or how did you intertwine that to start with for maybe people who are wanting to do that?
Um,
Or was it kind of like a natural
yeah,
process, like you kind of had one thing and then the other, and it's kind of
with yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. Because yeah, so I think you've got to have the mechanics of it first.
hmm
You've got to have the mechanics of the God's technique. You have to have the visualization, putting them together. Hmm. I definitely, obviously, I have to always, as always, say to people, get Tom's stuff in terms of his material, and this is his modern legato tutorials, where he goes into some of this. But for me, where I kind of uh, what I found incredibly useful um, was to be able to just like keep the mechanics of the technique the same,
hmm
and then play through things with consistent streams of subdivisions. Maybe I can demonstrate this,
Yeah,
perhaps. What
that'd be
have I got
amazing.
here? Let's see. I don't know if can you hear that? Okay, I've got these in, and so it's a little bit. Is it
Can't really
quiet?
hear it much, but we'll probably pick it up from hopefully your
Yeah,
end
I know.
recording.
I'm going to turn on original sound. I'd forgotten I'd done that. Let's see if you can hear this now. I don't know. Is that any better?
Yeah, it's a bit better. Obviously, your vocal is high, but we get the it's
Yeah. So what I would do is just try to take over whatever chord progression it might be. This is giant steps as I've got in my looper right now as I'm
yep.
practicing earlier on. But it really doesn't matter what it is. It's like if you can just find like say the third and the seventh across a moving chord progression, and just taking as long as it takes you first of all outside of time, but then when you are doing it in time, like for example to that backing track there,
hmm
I can take like this should pick up. Yeah, I think it's picking up my end. So as you sync it up, you
That's
should
cool. Yeah, it doesn't have
hopefully
to be
you'll hear
perfect
it.
quality as long as it gets something.
Um, so if I was to just choose a subdivision, so over this track, this is a bossa kind of. This is about
hmm
105 beats per minute. So I would literally just kind of keep the legato, keep the technique the same, exactly as correct as I can, and then just stream um, just this consistent subdivision.
Okay.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
let's see if I can. So So that would just be like going one single note at a time like that. So I'll sort of increase the subdivision. And then gradually just keep increasing it. So it
Yeah.
is actually a little hard to do it. It's getting a little bit cold now in terms of inconsistent. But the idea
Yeah.
is if you start with one subdivision that's really, really slow and consistent, and then sort of work that up through it.
And build it through it.
So hopefully that comes across in the yeah. So that's how I did it, but obviously not with that tune. I
No,
would
yeah.
start it with
Well, just explaining it, I think
like
people
with
just want to,
all
when they
the
want to get going and
classics.
stuff, it's just a good thing to know that where they can, the steps what they need to get there. It's like it didn't just come overnight.
Yeah.
You couldn't just wake up you didn't just wake up one day and go like, I
No,
can see the fretboard.
no,
You know.
no, absolutely not. And it was like, and this is not musical either. Of course, this is an exercise in terms of,
Mm.
I think, the training wheels to being able to then hope
100%.
make
Yeah.
things musical. But this is just, can I see over the chords? Can I see the three and the seven? Can I then?
And like you say with the solo app, not having the backing tracks or anything there, it's just you and the guitar, and you've got to be able to outline those chords as you go.
Yeah, exactly. So if you can hear those chords behind, within the lines that you're playing, and that's ultimately the goals what I was trying to achieve and what we were talking about earlier on. But no, you absolutely don't get there. And this is the difficulty. It's like, if someone's got really great ears naturally, then it's so much of this, I think, is that the older I get and the better I get, I realize just how important ears are, and how ultimately you're kind of at the mercy of your biology.
Mm.
It really seems that you can obviously train it, but like in terms of those raw the early days of doing this when you're young, you're kind of really very much at the mercy of your biology. So in terms of someone's air quotes natural ability,
Yeah.
so it can be. So if you want to overcome that hurdle, like, you don't have amazing ears, I do not have amazing ears. So to overcome that hurdle, you have to like work extremely hard, um, to kind of scaffold this with your visualization. And I get the feeling you've perhaps done a lot of this, but obviously I've done this tons, in that the way that my ears would help learn this stuff was, if I was to think of, if I want to, as I practice my intervals, like, so here's my three,
Mm-hmm.
here's my three, here's
Mm-hmm.
my three, here's my three. Well, over time, as going through the kind of the drill of practicing this stuff, the very nature of going through this so many times, looking at it, saying three out loud as I do this, three, then that sound kind of is over time starts
Yeah.
to bake into my ears.
Yeah.
So then when I look at the fretboard and I'm thinking of the G as my root note here,
Mm-hmm.
then I can kind of predict and audiate what that note is going to
Already.
sound like
Yeah.
before I play it. And that helps inform your choice as whether do I want to play that or not then, because
Yeah.
you are. So in some ways, and Tom said this first time, I remember him saying this absolutely, was that your eyes are training your ears,
Yes.
because the visualization aspect of it is like, what this looks like. I know if I play this and I come down to the three here,
You know what it looks like.
then
Yeah. Yeah.
against, and I know what that looks like, and that can help do the heavy lifting for the ears if they are
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
instinctively seeing, if the ears are not instinctively doing this in a very natural way. So we can utilize the geometry of the fretboard to our advantage to help by, practicing these things in a very, in a very visual way, can kind of improve these. And that's
Yeah.
absolutely been the case for me. That now when I look down the fretboard and I'm thinking of any given harmonic scenario, harmonic area, that I can now more readily hear what is going to sound like on my fingers. So
Yes. It gives you a head
that's
start, doesn't it?
incredibly,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, very much, yeah.
Um,
So yeah, I would definitely start by uh, root notes, being incredibly confident with the root notes,
yeah.
and then being able to, as I say, using something like solo, or just thinking intervallically, learning you had to see the fretboard in terms of intervals, and then having that as one side of the skill, and then the other side of the skill would be like the mechanics of, I guess in this case, legato. It's putting them together, like kind of So kind of rushed a few steps there in terms of like demonstrating it, but like it's very much those two skills have got to be pretty solid. I'm not
Yeah.
saying you can't do them at the same time, but you've got to be really resist the urge to want to blaze and burn fast on this, and be really content just being super slow. Um,
Yeah, really
that's
methodical,
the
isn't
hard
it,
thing
in the practice? Because I think,
for a lot of people, I find.
yeah, I think we've all been kind of guilty where we think we're kind of practicing and we're just burning over like a track, but then like sitting down and actually, if it's kind of sounding crap, it means you know it's something you need to work on. And if it, in this case, if there's stuff like the changes you want to improve on, whether it be legato, if you're sounding not how you like, then it's probably something that you will do need to work on. Especially the change, the whole thing with the changes in the fretboard. It's a constant, always trying to revolve, isn't it? With it, never ends.
Yeah. One final thing that I do a lot still now to this day when I'm thinking about learning something, and this is not changes, but it definitely, maybe it's the bit I should have said, um, it's kind of in between like learning the
Hmm.
technique and then learning to play the changes, would be to like take the technique and explore it through a new harmonic area that's not changes per se.
Yep.
So like taking, like I was talking earlier about learning the harmonic major
Hmm.
modes or whatever when I was practicing the solo. I can't use solo right now, and
No,
it wouldn't make much sense.
it's
And it wouldn't
complicated
make
as
much
it
sense
is.
anyway
Yeah.
because it's not through the Zoom call.
Yeah.
But if I was to take, say, I don't know, like if I'll just take a drum beat
Cool.
and then just choose a set of intervals to then explore with a consistent subdivision. I've done this a hell of a lot, and this is really useful for, I think, bridging the gap between learning the technique and then doing it with the changes.
Right. Okay.
Let's take let's do harmonic. Let's do harmonic major. So C harmonic major.
Okay.
So I'm going to just think of the intervals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, flat 6, 7, and so that would sound like this. It's a really beautiful sound.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's,
So I would just take something like a drum beat and then just try to play a consistent improvise, just random notes almost, just with that sound, and thinking like, so 1, flat 6, 2, 3, 1, 7, flat 6, 7, 1, 3, flat 6, 7, 2, 3, 5, flat 6, 7, 2, 1, flat 6, 4, 2, 1, 7, flat 6, 5, 3, 1, 2, 7, 1, flat 6, 7, 2, 4, 5, flat 6. Gets hard because I can't physically say it at the same time. But that's what's going on in my brain,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking purely there of what do the intervals of this harmonic major scale look like against any given root note. So here's my root note. So here's my 2. There's my 7. There's my flat 6.
and that's, whether you're just starting out knowing the major scale, and like you said earlier, or playing harmonic major, melodic minors, harmonic minors. Keeping that same concept, it's going to work wonders, isn't it? For you're reinforcing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because I'm doing that. Obviously, I'm showing you there what I practice myself now. The stuff. But you can totally do that the same. I could just do to Dorian. Good old Dorian. It's just the same concept. I'm just thinking about what are the notes that I'm playing, where are my intervals, and where do they fall against any given root note. So for Dorian, say just C Dorian. 6, 1, flat 3, 2, 4, 5, flat 7, 2, 1, flat 7, 2, 6. And I imagine, I'm guessing that you must have done a lot of this as well, because
Yes.
this
A
is
lot.
so.
Yeah.
That to
it's
me
like you
is
say, that is
incredibly
proper practice, isn't it? That is what your practice should look like. Like it should be.
It's exploring something in a way that is It's not necessarily musical. It's not musical, but
No.
it's you're you're really exploring the raw nuts and bolts of the things that you need in order to make music and to be free to make music. I think
Yes.
so. So yeah, it's that would be I think the way that I describe it is that yeah, it's definitely one way that practice can look like and should look like if your goal is if your goal is like the context I was talking about is
Yeah.
to
And
do
when it
these
comes
kinds
to
of things that we're
playtime,
talking
then it
about.
all
Yeah.
comes out, doesn't it? So hopefully.
Well, hopefully, like
Hopefully.
like it doesn't always.
No, even then you feel like you've
Um,
been shortchanged if it doesn't.
yeah. Well, it's one of these things where you're like I was talking about earlier about putting things into practice in the real world, like playing with people, jamming with people. Like if I think about all of this practice, as much as I love doing it, and it's really, really important, they're like
Yeah.
some of the best stuff for me has been through jamming with Tom and jamming with Dan and jamming with
Yeah.
anyone that I can sort of get my hands on
Yeah.
to that experience. Like, and I like to tell this story because it really hammers at home the importance of it. And like when I first started doing this and jamming with people, I remember like so Tom and I would jam together, and it would be it's an absolute privilege, isn't it? And it's a really really lucky situation to be in. And so you would imagine, knowing Tom's playing, perhaps knowing my playing, that it would all be like fusion backing tracks and just shredding lots of legato. It's almost never been that.
Mm, mm,
When we jam together, it's almost never that.
mm, mm.
It's like the way it would go down is like you just open up the real book, you just choose like some really hard, super hard set of changes. It's standard, and it would be we just have to play it. And it was this like thrown in at the deep end, kind of feet to the fire, like sink or swim, kind of.
Yeah.
What I mentioned earlier about being in college and getting pointed at to take a solo or something really hard. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
it was like
Some
he was
flashbacks.
doing that but by that
But you could
point,
do it.
I had the basic skills to be able to
Yeah.
at least have a go and it not be
Mm,
a
mm.
disaster. So I remember that being sort of 2016, 17 period of time when we were doing that a heck of a lot. Absolutely transformative for my playing in a
Mm.
way that nothing else has been, even with all of the discipline practice and the real deep practice I've done, like the sitting down with other people, and just making music and trying to
Yeah.
play stuff, and
You.
being the worst guitar player in the room is the
Mm.
best. It's a
Yeah.
cliche, but it really
Yeah.
is the best thing. In fact, I think it'd be really cool at some point to hang out with you and actually play together for this
Love to.
exact
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah.
Because I think, like we probably would, probably have a good time doing it because
I
we've got
reckon.
similar kinds of interests and things,
Yes.
and that'd be great. It's like this kind of pushing one another, like in
Yeah. It's
it's
so
really
beneficial.
enjoyable and it's enjoyable and it's beneficial. It kind of like you drags you up if you're the worst, if you're the worst out of in the room, and or if you're even if like I remember talking to someone about this and it's like, well, asking the question like, is it fun for you? Because I'm like a way shitter guitar player, and it's like, and I had to at some point you just have to believe someone when they say yeah, because I can he would say like, no, I've got my own challenges I can import into this, and I can be
Yeah.
practicing things, and even if so long as I've got the core skills, can I keep time? Can I have I got decent tone? Have I got decent time? So long as those things are there, then it doesn't matter the disparity between the two players. Like you can find really enjoyable things to work on
Yeah.
and together and stuff. So I'm incredibly
Such a great
grateful
point.
for everyone that's been kind of generous enough to kind of sit down and suffer through my playing in a jam
Oh no, no,
scenario.
no, no. Like you say,
Yeah.
you get something out of it. More than out of it, because there's probably times where going back those years in your first years of developing maybe this kind of new age, your second life, the second coming as your guitar player, where you probably have
Yes,
flashbacks to that and you
it's
probably think how far you've
born
come
again.
with, yeah, the perspective of like how far you've come with it. And it's like, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm still on this journey, but my God, like I've already in that short space of time, whether it be the last 10 years, is a short time to what I've developed since then and be able to jam with those sorts of people. It's worked wonders.
I never ever yeah, 10 years ago, I would never ever have expected to be at the point I'm at with the peace I've made with this thing,
Mm. Mm.
and to kind of reconcile with it in a way that is really passionate and healthy. Um, I think it's been, I feel incredibly, incredibly fortunate and lucky. I managed to kind of pull out the nosedive.
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, and that's a testament to your hard work, I guess, as well, isn't it? You haven't just hasn't just come to you. You've sat down and be like, right, I'm doing this, and that's
true. Yeah. I always find it super interesting. Like, how did that, why did I happen to have that desire for hard work? How did I still, it's like, I alluded to it earlier on in terms of my interest in philosophy and things. And I do find still that super interesting. Like, well,
oh my God, I could
yeah,
have
I
many
had to do the
conversations about
work,
philosophy. See, I love stuff like that,
but
and like finding
uh,
that music, guitar, life balance is like you talked about earlier. You did learn
mm,
Arabic, was it? You said, it's
yeah,
sometimes it's not the be all and end all of the guitar to me, and you it probably is, but there is many other things which I think maybe a lot of guitarists are into, where we do look at philosophy and like we kind of be deep thinkers. That's probably another topic for another day.
I,
No.
my wife would say that I overthink. Yes, that's
Oh
another
God,
talk for
tell me
another day.
about it.
But
Yeah,
I'm an overthinker,
yeah,
to the point where I know it's sort of, uh, and that can be potentially one of the things with imposter syndrome, isn't it? It's like you overthink and you cripple yourself with sort of, can be sort of self doubt and things. It's definitely, that's what I've done at various
yeah.
points.
But then it's
It's
pushed you on, hasn't it? Because that imposter syndrome can be kind of for you it's terrible, but it makes you push on, and you kind of
yeah,
it makes you.
it's finding a healthy balance of it. Like
That's
I
the
said,
key. That's the
it's
key.
finding a healthy balance of being, you don't want to be in. I kind of, I'm envious of the people, when you get a really, really big ego on someone's got a really, really big ego and they're actually really good as well. It's like they
Yeah,
can back
yeah.
that up.
We
It's
hate
like,
those.
man, what a position to be in. Like, it's like, it's, I always find those kind of people, fascinating, not annoying really. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think I'm kind of envious in a way of like, because
Believe their own
I,
hype, and they've got it. Yeah,
yeah, and they've got it. It's like, I, I find it fascinating. It's this, but no,
yeah. It's
that's
something
certainly not certainly
I
not
wish
me.
I had more of. Yeah, and it's a confidence thing, I guess, isn't it? Um,
Yeah,
but look, I know
is it
we're
confidence getting? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I don't want to. I could be all night chatting guitars and
Yeah.
whatnot, but
So, oh, it's 9:30. Yeah,
yeah.
I need to. I got to clean this place up and get it ready for filming tomorrow. We're doing Tom and I tomorrow are just like filming B-roll of the app all day. So we just got cameras on gimbals, basically doing squatting and like doing
Oh my
this with
word!
gimbals all day. So last time I did it, I put my back out for like 2 days because it was basically like doing 6 hours of squat workout.
My
So
word!
I'm hopefully gonna take more breaks tomorrow and the next week and not overdo it.
Stretch out
Yeah,
tonight
I've got
then.
tons of B-roll to shoot.
That's
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Well, thanks for this. It's been really enjoyable to chat, and thanks for having me on your channel. Yeah.
No, yeah. Thanks, Dave, and cheers for sitting down and like giving us your insight, your expertise, and if they I'll put all your info down below in the comments or your website, Guitar Hour
Oh yeah,
Podcast, the
that'd be great.
solo app
Yeah.
links, and your YouTube channel, of course, and socials. But yeah,
Thank you very much.
thanks for joining me for this nearly 2 hours of talking. It's gone so quick. But
It has,
yeah,
yeah, rattles by. Yeah,
yeah,
thanks, man.
really
I'm gonna
appreciate
start.
it, mate.
Okay, thanks.
Nice one. Cheers, dudes.